I have a long-running tradition with my co-host, Mark Kidder, although I haven't done it in a number of years. It used to be tradition that every year on his birthday, I would give him a handmade birthday card. Now, you might go, really? That's kind of weird. But you have to understand, this wasn't just a birthday card. I made it the most highly insulting birthday card it could be. I mean, I did things like called him a rat-fink bastard. I made one that was all very pretty and sparkly, like he was a 10-year-old girl. It was all in good fun, and in fact, it was one of those things that Kidder used to always look forward to. Every year on his birthday, he'd get a brand new, wholly original, insulting birthday card. But I haven't done it in a number of years. Time kind of forced it. When I lived in Montana, I couldn't send it. But I decided I would maybe bring back a little of that tradition with something for his Christmas gift. So I was in luck when Reaper Miniatures produced something that gave me the perfect idea for an insulting yet totally Kidder Christmas gift. Board games, role-playing games, painting and assembling models and miniatures. These are my hobbies. I'm Howard Blues, one half of the mildly popular, somewhat watchable, always entertaining podcast, Beer, Blues, and BS. I'm inviting you to join me on my journey through the hobby. Also, as I rebuild my cave of wonders. Hi, everyone. Howard Blues here, and I've been gone for a bit, but that was because I knew this project was going to take me a while, and therefore I've not had time to really film a whole lot of anything else. So what I have here is a project for my co-host, Mark Kidder, and it's a good one. Reaper Miniatures, as part of the Bones 5 Kickstarter, produced a set of figures that were magic hands. These were translucent plastic, and the whole idea was that they're basically to represent spell effects when you're playing D&D. That was cool. As one of their kind of bonus things that they did behind the scenes, they made a figure called the Disrespecting Hand, and it's in clear, translucent plastic, but it's basically a giant hand giving the finger. Now, I bought one of these, and I bought it solely because I had this idea, and it came to me almost instantly. One of Kidder's favorite wrestlers of all time was Stone Cold Steve Austin. Stone Cold was known for really two things. Well, at least give it quiet. Drinking beer profusely and flipping the bird. So I had this idea I got this figure. Hey, I now have it, and it's got all of this fun, lovely stuff on the bottom here that looks like it could be beer or a liquid. I mean, I understand it's supposed to be magic, but could be liquid. So then I went out and found myself a can, and I have the beginnings of a really neat project, but it'll help a little bit if I show you, and I'm going to kind of walk you through how I do some of this stuff. So let's flip the camera around, go to the painting desk, and get started. And I'll explain. I've already done a few things, so we'll explain a little bit on that. All right, so let's dive into this project. There's a couple of things I have already done to kind of start. I found a can for this. So with this project, the idea is that I want to create a replica of the Stone Cold beer, his Broken Skull IPA. So I had to get a can, and for this I found actually it was a Starbucks double shot can. So I drank that, and I quickly primed it before the weather got too cold, but in the haste you can see the primer didn't take quite all the way up here. So and there's a few spots, so I'm gonna end up brushing on some primer onto this, which is okay. I found a base for it, although I want to add some stuff to the base to make it a little bit more interesting than just a black base. And I have my figure here. Now, I actually, last night we filmed episode 37 of the podcast, and after the show, there was a lot of talking afterwards, and I was bored isn't quite the right word, but I wasn't really part of the conversation. I was just listening in, being a fly on the wall. So I started working on stuff. So I actually took and I removed the hand and the finger from its base, which actually was pretty easy. It plopped off pretty quick with that. And then I shaved down the plug, so that's why it doesn't really sit in there real well anymore. And I'll find a use for this base again at some point. But right now, it's done. So I have this piece, and I know that I want to do a little bit of green stuff work on the base. I have my Kneadite, which is also known as green stuff. I know there are other putties and epoxies out there that people like to use, such as Milliput. I haven't tried Milliput, so I kind of stuck with the Kneadite in this case. And then I have one of these Green Stuff World rollers, and it is basically an acrylic rolling pin that has a lovely wood pattern on it. So we'll do that, and we're going to give it some wood planking for there. But the other part of that I noticed as I was trying to, as I played with this, trying to figure out, okay, how do I want the finger to be on the hand? And I came up with basically a position like this. Really, it kind of hit into a couple of different issues. One, the tab here kind of pushes it up and such. So I might remove the tab and maybe trim off a part of it. What I'm thinking, remove a part of it so that and then just basically glue that down flat and flush. So I might just make a couple of snips. But the other part is, because if I hold it like this, you can kind of see my beer doesn't quite fill up the hole, the mouth of the can. So I'm going to do a little bit of green stuff to kind of fill that in as well, so you don't get dust and stuff down there. I'm still finding little shards of this hand like everywhere. That's what I get for hobbying that late at night. So, a couple of different tasks then to do. The Kneadite is going to take a while to dry, so I'm going to start on that. It says about 4 to 5 hours to really harden. It will harden strong enough, I think, that I can put some primer and such on it before that. So you get started. I realize after I've now set up my camera here that I need one more pin, so we're going to just try to set the camera back. Look inside Howard's hobby drawer. There. And I think we can live with that. Okay. So I had to get a plain pin. So I was also going to work on this last night, but the other problem I had was I discovered that my water cup was upstairs from a painting project that we did with Junior. So I didn't have that. Pull this out. This is a brand new pack of green stuff. And if you're like me, I am terrible at predicting just how much green stuff I'm going to need. So I'm going to cut off a fairly healthy chunk, which will probably be way too much, but I'm hoping that it'll be enough to cover the base and do some trim work there. So I am going to just dip. And I have an older blade on this particular X-Acto knife, so that's why I don't mind cutting into this green stuff. Put a bit of water on my hands. I know that there are people who say, hey, yeah, use Vaseline and such on your tools and such with this. I have never had much luck with that. For those who don't know what green stuff is, Kneadite, it's basically a two-part epoxy. And as you can see, there's a blue piece and a yellow piece. And if you're really into your knowledge of this stuff, you could tell which one is the hardener of the two. But it's called Kneadite, and you basically take and you mesh the two bits together, and it goes from being blue and yellow into being green. You can kind of see it starting to take on that shape. Yeah, we're getting into the green. Green stuff has been used a lot in the miniature hobby. A lot of original miniatures were sculpted with green stuff, and there are some people who can do some amazing stuff with green stuff. I am not one of those people. As I kind of tell people, painting tends to be the main part of my hobby. It's what I tend to do. When you get into anything else, sculpting and such, I have to cheat as much as I can. So I'm going to take my plain rolling pin and just start kind of trying to get it out. And oh, that is not wet enough. Oh. So in cases like this where my roller's not wet enough, I just re-put it into the water and let it soak a little bit longer. I'm just trying to roll this out to get it as flat and as level as I can. But you can see I'm still having some issues with my roller not being at the right amount of water on it to really work. It takes me a while to get it right. I even find that, the end is working better, so I'm focusing more on the end. You can use Vaseline on some of these, but it's not the best, and it tends to make more of a mess. I ended up not having enough green stuff. I've never been great at predicting the amount of green stuff that I would need, so cut up some more, start wetting it down, beating it into that lovely green color to kind of fill in my base. And this time I know I'm going to make too much, but I got a plan for that that I will deal with in a little bit. So again, trying to fill in those edges, trying to really just kind of make it a nice, hopefully flat and level surface. Because if your surface isn't level when we get to actually using the texture roller, it won't set in the right, and it can make some problems. So for this particular project, as I'm kind of leveling this out, the texture I decided to go with, I had a lot of different textures I could have chosen for it, but I went with the wood texture roller. I mean, all of these come from Green Stuff World. There's a problem with these texture rollers, though, and it's how they manufacture it. It has these little striation lines in it, so if you push down too hard, you get those. So sometimes you have to go back and smooth them. So I'm just rolling it out, hopefully getting it. Now, one of the things is that because of like how you cut off the model and how the bottom is, one of the tricks I have found when I have done textured bases like this is I like to put the model on and then press it in a little bit and just make an indentation into it as to where that model goes. And that's because, again, if my surface isn't completely level, I've had times where I've gone to put the model on, I haven't been able to figure out or find that original orientation, and so I've really struggled with getting the model in the right kind of spot. As you can see, I still got a few places to patch things up. So I need to do a little bit of that work, as I said a little bit before. So I'm taking some green stuff, just small pieces, again, using my sculpting tools, just going in and pressing in and trying to match up that wood grain. It's not the easiest thing to do, but I have to do that. Next, I got to figure out how I'm going to put this hand on the can. And I spend a lot of time looking at different ways to position it and figure out how to get the top. Because I want it to look like it's shooting out the opening. Like you just cracked it open and out flies this hand. And so I try different ways. I look at it. I don't like one way. Maybe it leaves too much of a gap here. Maybe it's too much there. The angle of the hand was a big issue because how do I get it to line up, the way I want? So I'm going to get it to a position. I think I'm going to glue it, just using some super glue, kind of tucking it in. I found a spot on the ledge where it's like, if I can get it to stick there, that'll work. But I had some problems getting this to glue to the metal, and really have to hold it. And so, in times like this, I will usually try to speed up the gluing process, and you can do that with actually using a bit of baking soda. Baking soda and super glue has a chemical reaction and instantly hardens. It's a great thing to do if you have two materials that aren't really sticking together well. At this point, I clearly wasn't happy with how it was sitting, so I decided to start over. And part of what I decided to do was use a little bit of that extra green stuff, level it out, get my positioning right. Now it should hopefully sit better, and the glue should really hold. And thankfully then I didn't have to break out the whole baking soda trick to try and get it to stick, because while it works really well, it can also add extra texture and such. I need to sculpt in some liquid, and to do that I'm just starting by making some balls, because I kind of want it to be this natural flow. And so I start with balls, pushing them in, and then I'm using my tools to sculpt it. And this is actually, I gotta make a confession. Sculpting is not my strength. I am not great at sculpting with green stuff. I'm still learning. I'm very much a noob in that sense. So a lot of that is, for me, is trial and error. And as you kind of watch this time lapse of it, you'll see me kind of go back over things and try to correct things. And while I'm doing this particular set, I'm playing actually with some tools I got the Christmas before this, which are these silicone sculpting tools. In the past, all of my sculpting tools have been metal, and you kind of have to keep them wet, and you run the danger of when that metal kind of dries out, then the green stuff sticks. But I got these silicone ones, and boy, did I fall in love with these things. They are awesome for working with green stuff. It just, I didn't know what to think when I first started using them. Now I wish I had had these so much sooner in my hobby career, because once I kind of got to playing with the different silicone heads, I really got it figured out what was working and what was working really well. And so it became easier and easier to get a result that I was happy with. But this did take a while, and it did take a lot of kind of playing around with it, trying things, going back over spots, filling in here, filling in there. Maybe it's working better at this spot, maybe it's not. It's a challenge. And especially, as I said, sculpting. I've never done any sculpting. Even in art classes I've taken, I haven't done sculpting. So when it comes to green stuff and that, I mean, for the most part, I've always used it for patching things. Basically gap filling on models. And I have some of those that are pretty horrendous because I've had to learn and I wasn't good. And I'll admit that. So yeah, that was kind of the whole thing. So with this, again, I'm trying to create the sense of liquid, like it's gushing out, like it's flowing. Because again, the inspiration for this is Stone Cold Steve Austin and how he would catch these beers, he'd open them up, and he'd pour them out, and just flowing beer, and it fits with that. So that's kind of what I'm going with, and I'm just constantly working and reworking until I get something that I am happy with. Now, you might wonder, what do I do with the extra green stuff? Well, I have the base that this model originally started on, which has these cobblestone pattern, and I don't really want it to go to waste, so I put the green stuff in there, and again, break out these tools and try to just sculpt them into cobblestones, and eventually just create a base that will serve for a future model. So that's kind of the cool thing about this hobby, and the thing that I absolutely love is just, there can at times be very little waste. You can get a feel for what we are going for with this. So coming together quite nicely. As I said, I gotta let this all dry. It's time to prime. Oh, I wish I had black primer, but I don't. I couldn't find it, so I had to use gray, which is okay. The color of your primer does have an effect on it, and white is good for bright. Black will kind of get you a little bit of a duller, desaturated color, and gray is kind of in between, so it'll be okay. But I'm just slapping this stuff on. And I'm not adding water. Sometimes with primers, I've added water and it gets too runny and it doesn't stick and it takes several coats. So here, I'm just not even bothering with water. I'm just slapping this stuff on good and thick. I'm gonna really try to make sure I get it everywhere and in the cracks. So these texture rollers kind of leave space. I also kind of cover the underside of the can where I missed it when I did the aerosol spray. I also kind of decided, you know what, I'm going to hit all of the metal spots as well, because that'll help with the metallics that I'm planning to lay down. I also see some spots on the black that didn't quite go the way I wanted, so slap it on the can as well. Making sure I get the top. Because this is already kind of covered, I'm good. And then I start priming over the green stuff for the liquid beer, making sure I get that covered, and then moving up the hand. And I'm just using Reaper's Gray Primer. It's a nice brush-on primer. And yes, for the Reaper fans who maybe tune in, yes, I know it's bones. Yes, I know I don't need to prime it. But I have excess primer in my well, so I'm going to do it. It's kind of I hate to waste the paint is kind of the situation here. So I'm gonna just prime it even though I don't need to. But I that's how it goes sometimes. So just making sure I get all those cracks and crevices and everywhere, and fill it in. Overall, I'm excited for the next steps of this because we're getting to slap on color, and boy, I'll have a lot to talk about with that. Also here you see I'm actually holding the can in my hand. I'm not actually using my paint holder, which is sitting over there, which is not always the best. I should have it on there, and really I'm just using it's a pill bottle with some poster putty on there. I should be using it. I forget the reason why I wasn't. I think part of it was fear of not getting it to stick. But you can see I'm applying a second coat, making sure. You might notice, hey, Howard, you're not doing the middle. Well, that's because that's where the can's going to sit. And here it is. It's all glued together, ready to go. And we're going to start off with base coating this beast. And I'm going to start with the metal. And for that, I'm going to go with Reaper's Filigree Silver, because it's going to be a great starting base coat color. And then I'm going to come in and do a shaded metallics on it, and I'll talk about that when we get there. It's something I kind of like to do. And right now, I'm kind of being sloppy with this base coat. I'm not worried about perfection because I'm going to base coat these other colors, and truthfully, with the base coat, I can fix mistakes. I'm not stuck. You know, if I get something, you know, some of this metal on a different spot, it's okay. I can cover it, and it's a light or colored silver. It'll cover just fine. That said, it's not coating well. You can kind of see the splotchiness as I'm doing the top of the can, which means I'm going to have to come in for another coat. So it's something I'm kind of used to with all of this. So again, just trying to get that color on there, and eventually it gets to a point where, you know, the paint's not drying fast enough. I'm just pushing stuff around. So we're going to move on. I'm going to use this as an opportunity to go around the base and clear off the excess green stuff from the roller. That sometimes happens, and I kind of like to do it sooner rather than later because one of the things I'm going to move to base coating next is the base itself, and I'm going to use tanned leather, also by Reaper Miniatures. And this is kind of actually my highlight color, but I'm starting with that because I know how I'm going to shade it and get it down to what I want. If we're going to do a wash to shade, I'll come back with a dry brush and then an ink to tint it. I also like to get the base coat on early because as I do the other colors, if I spill paint or splotch paint, that's okay because it'll help give my wood an organic texture. I do the same with stone. I don't mind if I spill paint on it because it will, in the process, become something usable and help make the rock a little bit more interesting, or in this case, the wood a little bit more interesting. So that's why I want to get that coat on first. Moving on to the can itself, I'm using Reaper's Yellowed Bone. And I'm starting with this on the can, and I should have used right away, but I didn't, and I will later. I should have used, Reaper has a wonderful thing called the Power Palette. And it's this cool little thing where you can actually load an image in and has a little eyedropper, and you click on it, and it will tell you the Reaper colored paint that most likely matches this. I didn't do this right away, and so the color that I chose, it's a bit too yellow, and it needs to be a bit more desaturated. This is too bright. You can also see it's kind of an ugly base coat. My paint is a bit too runny, and I was kind of okay with that because the can itself has some texture, but even this was just, it wasn't going on well. This was an ugly base coat. I just wasn't too happy. Again, you can kind of see I'm slopping it on. I'm using it to cover that filigree silver where I went too high. I'm trying to be a little bit more careful so I don't wreck the filigree silver that I've already laid down, but covering my mistakes. So now I'm kind of going in for second coats. So once again, doing my flooring because I want that in place so that it catches anything. And again, we can make a nice organic wood base. Now I'm going back in and trying to put in the second coat on the can, and it's just, it's fighting me. It is fighting me hard. You can tell I'm frustrated. The color's not where I want it to be. It's not coating the way I want it to coat. It's just not going the way I want it. And you hear me laughing as I do this, and that's Miniatures. The best line I ever heard, and I wish I could remember who I heard say it, but they said that the best thing is just constantly fixing mistakes is what painting is. So here I am trying to fix my yellowed bone that I was using for the can. I'm adding some gnawed bone and graveyard bone by Reaper, trying to desaturate it a little bit, get it a little bit more of a gray tone. Also to thicken up my paint so that my base coat does not look as garbage as it as it has been. You know, and I'm a little bit happier with this. I'm slapping it on, but here's now the problem. I went from really thin, really runny paint to a bit thicker paint. And so this isn't going to coat as nice and smooth as I want it to because I'm slopping it on, and it's going to create a texture where I didn't really want a texture. Yeah. Again, painting miniatures is the joy of constantly fixing mistakes. That's what it is. But I like the color better, and that's partially because, again, I went on, I used Reaper's power palette to kind of hone in on what color I should be using for the can, and it looks better. It looks a little bit browner and a little bit more desaturated. So I'm in the ballpark, which is good. It's mixing colors, not my strength. All right. Gonna start on the flesh tones with some Caucasian flesh. And just giving it a nice, simple base coat. I'm not worried too much with this paint being a bit thin and maybe not coating perfectly because flesh is imperfect. It doesn't have to be, you know, all the exact same tone, because if you look at your hand, it's not the same tone. There are different tones and colors and variations in there. Now I'm going to pull out some Deflector Shield, which is a lovely yellow color. I have to use my Reaper pokey tool to unstop that. I'm also going to grab a little bit of brown because this is too much of a yellow, and I'm going for an amber beer color. So I use a little bit of Heartwood Brown to kind of add a brownish tone to my yellow. And giving it good mixed up. Is that beer colored? I'm not quite sure. I'll have to think of how to best to do that. But I'm starting kind of with the shade, and I'm going to plan on building up and probably using multiple coats. And I have to say, you might notice my order of operations when I'm painting, and I want to talk about it a little bit because in the past, the way I would do this is a kind of a process of paint the color, finish the color. So in this case, like if I had started on the metallics, I would do all of the metallics, get them completely shaded, highlighted, all of that, and then I would move on to the next color. And what that really did was it hindered my process a lot because I would get something to where it was perfect, and then I was paranoid about ruining it and making a mistake. So I would get to a spot where I was stuck because I didn't want to make the next step. And after watching some different tutorials, you know, because I was trying to figure out how to paint more and try to get into that, the thing that I learned was, you know, from watching some was that people would actually take and they would kind of base coat everything and just kind of work through kind of their next steps with it and not get too far along to where you had something perfect and you were worried about making a mistake. So in this case, I'm coming back in. I'm doing a second coat on my hand. I'm liking the flesh color on it. It's looking good. You know, and it's the perfect thing for me to work on while my beer color is drying. So that has really kind of been the thing that has unlocked painting a little bit more for me, is this new take of kind of base coat everything, shade everything, and then highlight everything, and doing it kind of that way instead of, as I said, finishing one color at a time. Because that it really did slow me down, a lot of it. And it kind of helps me to work through then what I need to do next and that. So that's my process. And because I don't have any one piece of the model finished at a given time, I'm not afraid to move on like I used to be with some things. So now if I don't, it's usually mostly indecision about what color I want to do, or I might have made a mistake and I'm trying to figure out how to fix it. Is kind of the main difference on that. Since this is a IPA that I'm painting, because the Broken Skull Ranch beer is an IPA, I got me an IPA. So we're gonna just open this bad boy up, because having a reference is always helpful, especially when I'm trying to match colors. I want to see what exactly color I'm dealing with an IPA. So let me just pour this into here. You can all watch this incredibly rookie pour that I'm doing because I want it on camera, and therefore not using the proper angle of pour. The local geek can yell at me about it later and tell me how I should have done it differently. So I got my IPA poured, and yep, you can see actually I'm not as far off with my coloring, but it's definitely a bit lighter, a bit desaturated would be a good term for this. A little bit more of an ochre color in some spots. So I'm close. It's not bright yellow, so I don't want to go too bright as I do this. So that's kind of the great reason to have a reference, as I can see that. But it's time to go back to the can. Break is over. Beer was drunk. And now I need to try and get this can coated, and hopefully a bit smooth after overcoating. Again, fixing mistakes, one step at a time. So trying to get that done, and hopefully to a point where I can move on with the can. But it's looking good. The coverage is looking nice. I'm pretty with how that is going. Back to the hand again, doing yet another coat, and yeah, looking pretty good. Putting out a little bit of silver, and I'm just going in and touching up any spot where I got sloppy and hit my silver. So again, touching it up, fixing mistakes, correcting, getting everything base coated so that we can move on. I'm going to actually break out some varnish here, and varnishing. And I'm not doing it necessarily because I want to seal. This was a trick that I learned from watching some of the Reaper videos, and especially from Ed Pugh. He covered one of these in one of his tutorial videos, but using kind of a varnish or a seal-on primer like this. Or brush-on sealer, I should say, and kind of painting it on thick, and it kind of is a great way to fill and can help with some mold lines and gaps and things like that. So I'm trying to do that to deal with the fact that my painting was a little overdone before. So just coating it for that. After that's dry, it's time to do some washing, and for that I am going to use some Army Painter red wash and some sepia wash and kind of mix it together. And I'm starting with the wood. And I'm really liking the color on it. It's got it's a darker brown, but it's a nice warm color, which is good. It's filling in those cracks nicely. You can now kind of see the texture that's on there. And I'm just kind of hitting all the spots. And then I decided to use the same color on the beer to kind of give it some darkness to the crevices. Originally I had painted this as my shade, and I thought that I was going to stick with that and build up, but I decided with this wash, that'd be nice to actually go in and start there, and so bring it down even more, and to try and add a warmth and a richness to this beer. And again, kind of doing a second coat. I want it, and again, even with the flooring, I don't need it to be perfect because this is an organic material. It doesn't need to be perfect. And moving on, we're going to start the highlighting. Yep. Gotta start somewhere. I'm going to start with the beer. And I'm going to start trying to get a lighter yellow. I'm gonna get some of the deflector shield. I'm not gonna mix in the Heartwood brown like I did before. I'm gonna add some water to this just to thin it out because I want a nice light thin coat. So grab my water, and we'll add just a couple of drops. And so I'm using a flip top water bottle. I unscrewed it because the water bottle I normally use is an unscrewed top, and I just poured and flooded my my paint, so I get to start all over. So there's the deflector shield. Bring it properly timed. 2 drops of water, not all the water I put on. It's the great thing about this. You get to see my successes and my fails. And I'm just going to start going in and basically hitting the high points on the miniature, especially on that beer flow. Trying to just add to it and start to lighten it up. And I want this to be a light, thin coat. And I'm just going to continue to build up from there. I'm going to take and I'm going to add some bleached linen to the deflector shield, trying to desaturate it, trying to bring it into a lighter color that we can use and move kind of closer and closer to white. So I'm just going to kind of keep adding and desaturating, and eventually I'm going to get to white. I'm going to use white to form some flow texture lines. And that white will be bleached linen. But as I was saying, it took me a little bit to get to doing this part because I knew what I needed to do. I knew the next steps. And sometimes when you get to those next steps, there can be a bit of a hesitation. You know what you need to do, but I was kind of stuck. Not every bit on this can was coming out the way I wanted it to. There were parts I already didn't like about it, and I had thought about just starting over. Unfortunately, though, we were getting closer and closer to the day that Kidder and I were going to exchange gifts, and I just needed to get this done. So I had to push forward. Sometimes a deadline is good for things like that. So again, I'm just kind of working in on those highlights, trying to get this beer to look as liquidy and flowy. And I'm not worried about a super smooth, perfect blend on this. I know that after I get kind of the highest highlight, I'm going to come back in, I'm going to glaze it, and have that glaze bring the colors together a little bit more. So as you can see, I mean, you can see the contrast of what I got going here. You can see it going all the way from that dark amber color to the lightest color. I'm even going to get even lighter. I'm going to go all the way to just kind of pure bleached linen. And one of the things I'm trying to do here is to add these texture flow lines. I'm just doing kind of like streak lines. I'm not worried about like perfect coverage. I'm just kind of making little kind of almost like hash lines a little bit, with that building up the flow. That's the goal. It's just trying to build up the flow of what I'm doing. Now that I got all my highlighting done, I'm going to glaze this. And for that, I'm going to use some Privateer Press P3 yellow ink. And even though it's an ink and therefore already pretty runny, I still like to add some water to my inks. And I'm just going to lightly brush this on. I'm kind of dabbing a little bit off on my hand and then just kind of lightly brushing it on. And the goal is to kind of get my blend in on this. So I want the whites to feel more like a bright yellow white, and just to take and bring up the colors a little bit and just blend it all together. When I do successfully pull off glazing, I'm always happy with the approach. But I will admit, glazing is still one of those skills I am constantly working to get better at and trying to master as I continue my painting progress. The next step, I'm going to do some dry brushing. I've just got a large flat brush, and I am just going to basically try to dry brush the wood. I'm using some Heartwood Brown, followed by some Graveyard Bone, and I'm not worried about being perfect on this dry brush. Again, I'm trying to create texture. Wood is an organic material, so I don't want it all to look uniform. I want it to look different. So you might see me focusing in on some areas a little bit more, other places a little bit less. I'm just trying to create texture and therefore create interest in what I'm doing. One thing I will say, I have learned in more recent times here that people have had some great success using makeup brushes or round brushes for dry brushing, that they work even better than the flat brushes do. And that's something I actually have purchased some, and I need to try that out at some point. The other tip that I have heard is that you shouldn't, you might have noticed as I'm dipping my brush into the paint and then taking and wiping it off on this paper towel, trying to get it kind of thin. And one thing that was a tip that I've seen is that instead of doing that on an absorbent surface like a paper towel, you should do it on a hard surface. Because did I forget the exact reason why? But it has to do something with it that the towel takes up, even though you're not using moisture, it kind of just leaves you with just enough of the pigment and such in it that's why you kind of get a spotty feel when you dry brush. So my next thing is shaded metallics, and this is one I got from Reaper. And so I'm pulling out some filigree silver, some blue liner, some brown liner, some gloss varnish, and some water. And I'm going to try and mix this to get to a wash consistency. So the filigree silvers, because that's our regular color, the blue and the brown liners are going to provide the shade. I'm going to go more blue than brown because I want it to look more just like shadow and less like it's dirty and rusty, but I want a little bit of that kind of dirt to it. The gloss varnish will help keep its shine as we're doing it, so hopefully make it shine and pop a little bit. And the water is just to get it to a decent consistency. So these, are the liners by Reaper have been great when I do prime my bones models, which I do recommend because they are a little hydrophobic. The liners work really pretty well for that, and have done a nice job of serving as a base for that. And then I've always liked the Vallejo brush on varnishes. I still use them to this day, pretty much exclusively. Although I do have some Reaper brush on varnish. It's okay. It's okay. So once I have my mixture concocted, I'm just going to brush this over all of my metallics. And being that it's kind of a wash consistency, what it's going to do is, like a wash, it's going to settle in the recesses. I don't want it necessarily to pool, but it's going to settle. And then it's going to just, again, help to shade. And then I will have to come back in and probably do just a tiny bit of highlighting to just bring out the shine of the metal. And I'm going to have to do a little can touch up because this is wash quality. I'm going to have some of it spill out on the can. But overall, I love how this recipe comes out and how it works. And if you're going to be doing, true metal metallics, not non-metallic metallics. Oh, it's a little late when I'm recording this and my acronyms are a little gone. But for me, this works as a great shade, and I'm very happy with how it turned out. Now I'm going back in, touching up my can where I went a little too crazy, and just bringing it all kind of home. And I'm avoiding the hand. I will admit that, because that's the next thing. And but I'm going to start. I want to start with a wash. And I'm bringing out the Secret Weapon Miniatures Flesh Wash, which was a wash that was discontinued as Secret Weapon Miniatures is no more. There's actually a whole controversy about it that we covered on our regular show, Beer, Blues, and BS. That was, yeah. But I'm trying it out here, and I'm not going to lie. I wasn't super happy with how this came out. The Secret Weapon Miniatures Flesh Wash is a bit more olive green in color than I tend to like. I've used the Army Painter Flesh Wash, which is a little bit more of a reddish brown in tone, and I really like that one. But I wanted to try this one, and it's just, yeah, it just isn't. You can kind of see it here. It's looking far too green. So I know I'm going to have to do some reclaiming on this. And so I'm just kind of putting it in there so that hopefully all my shadows kind of have that coloring. But yeah, it took away the brightness that I was really enjoying in this hand. So, yep, here I go, back in with my flesh color, just trying to save this. First, I'm kind of just trying to hit some of the highlights, but I'm going to end up kind of rebase coating everything with it. As I said, I'm glad. I know most people in the YouTube community would just edit out these mistakes, but you're getting to see them. You're getting to see them firsthand. Every error, every mistake I make, it's all part of the process. All right. Now to do some work on the wood of my base, I actually am getting out some P3 brown ink, and I'm going to just do some glazing on the wood. And I'm really going to try and get this with shadows. I'm also adding a little P3 yellow ink to it as well, just to keep it a bright color. And again, as I said with my inks, I do like to add a bit of water to them. So I do love the P3 brown ink. It's got just this wonderful red tone to it. You add that yellow, and you can see it's kind of orangey-ish. Oh, so good. So good. So, wipe some of it off on my hand, and just kind of going in and just shading around and just bringing that dry brush down a little bit, kind of matching it in with the shade and the cracks, and just putting a lovely color, kind of some warmth into this base. And I try to leave the glaze at its most concentrated where there would be shadow. That's kind of the goal. So I'm kind of trying to keep the spots where my light would be a little bit lighter. That's the goal. That's the plan. We'll see how well it works. Okay, onto the hand. And unfortunately, I did a terrible job of noting what colors I'm using. But to shade this, I'm going to go with a technique I learned from a Privateer Press tutorial. I'm using some red with my original Caucasian flesh tone, and the idea is this is really watery, and I'm supposed to be kind of brushing it in, and it's going to create a shade and a shadow, because what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to end up following with green, and the idea with it is the color theory behind it is that when you mix red and green, you get brown. So the idea is that by me putting this into the shadow area, so then coming back over with green, I'm going to get a nice shadow color. Is the thought. As I'm trying to recover from that bad wash. So trying to hit my shadows, trying to get them in there, kind of lay them in. And again, I don't need to be super perfect because again, your hand is filled with so much color that some nice color variation will look absolutely okay. All right, so here I am. I'm following it up with a green, and it's more of an olive green, not like your bright Kelly greens. So kind of closer to an army camo green. And again, really thin, and I'm going to try and hit over these shadow spots where I've kind of hit the red. And you can kind of see it working here, where as that green kind of meets that red, it's kind of becoming brown and becoming a nice shade. That hopefully I should then be able to glaze it kind of back to the flesh color. It looks like hot garbage right now when you look at it, and yeah, it's I was a little panicked as I was doing this because it wasn't quite coming out, and you can see I found a spot I kind of missed, and I'm kind of hitting back with the green. Trying to make these shadows work as this tutorial had taught me. And part of the reason I think that this is going to fail me compared to the tutorial was that in the tutorial, he's painting a smaller figure. This is a big hand. So it should work, but I don't think I followed it quite 100% correct. And I think I just ended up creating myself a mess because now the shadow is too dark to everything else, which is too light. Yeah, it's I wasn't real confident at this point. Now I'm gonna kind of mix the two colors together to form brown. And again, trying to save it, trying to make this shade work. That's the goal. I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't super thrilled with how this was going. I started getting my flesh color. I try to bring it back, and as I start to panic, what ends up happening is I end up engaging in wet blending. And I have only ever done wet blending twice, both times in situations like this where I've completely panicked and trying to make something work. And for those who don't know what wet blending is, it's kind of continuing to add paint colors in as stuff is drying. And it's you kind of then build in your shades and such. So you can see me going to that brown color, and hey, here's the highlight that I'm adding in the flesh, and then working that in. I grab a purple because hey, purple is great for shading, and I'm starting to add purple into it. But when the purple gets too much, then I go back to the flesh tone and try and add that in, and it's it's how you kind of have to do it. It's just steps at a time. And it's, as I said, in this case I was just totally panicked, and so it is you are getting to see the rabid squirrel of my mind as I try to make this work. So now for the fingernails, I'm just using a bit of Tunic White for the fingernails. I'm kind of being kind of light on this because your fingernails just kind of have a light, whiter tone to it. So I'm adding those in, just trying to get my fingernails Now, here's where we get into some interesting stuff, because I know I'm going to do a transfer, but I realized that the transfers I used, there's the possibility of it not necessarily carrying over the white. So I'm trying to just kind of hedge my bet and paint in where I think I'm going to need white, so that colors show up and colors pop. So that's what I'm doing here. And I'm not going to lie, I'm guessing just a tiny bit. Actually, I'm not too bad. I think I had printed out a paper copy of the label that I was using. I'm going to be doing this as a transfer, and we'll see how that goes, as I kind of lay the groundwork for this. Now, one of the other things I wanted to do was I wanted to fix my hand just a little bit to make it a little bit more realistic. And to do that, I wanted to put in kind of the correct veins and such for your hand. So I'm getting some blue I'm going to be really light with to do the veins. And to help me with the veins, again, reference materials are great. So here's my reference material, which is actually my wife's hand. That's right. Lefty got to flip me off so I could see all of the veins in her hand, which was great. So I'm going to come in and start painting the veins in, again, using blue, using a fairly thin blue, and just kind of, again, looking at her hands. And that, if you're seeing paint bottles being knocked over the side, Junior was helping. As I was trying to do this. Because I was in panic mode about getting this done. So yeah, I'm just, again, kind of following the pictures I got from her. And I'm going to put some more of my flesh tone over it to kind of glaze and hide these. So I took this moment to quickly paint the lip of my base black. We're getting close, people. We're getting close to done. It's all coming to a close here soon. And once I had everything kind of glazed in and such, you know what? I am varnishing this model. I am making sure that it is coated and protected and ready for its big reveal. But I still am going to have to do the transfer. This is kind of like the last painting step before I do it, and we'll hopefully protect the model in case this transfer goes wrong, because, you know, why wouldn't it go wrong? What could possibly go wrong with it? I'm an expert at these things. Right? Right? That's why you're watching this, isn't it? So here we go. We're going to set this in. So decals, not my favorite thing in the world, but a necessary evil in this case. We'll set it in. It's supposed to sit for 5 seconds, and then we try and place it on the can. Has some microsol here too. I'll be using that. Try and help blend. And I'm sorry that you guys are getting bumped around, but trying to make sure that I am ready to do this. Because I'm not gonna lie, I'm scared this doesn't work and screw up. So here we go. Already you can see problem 1. The whole thing rolls up and then starts to bleed. I am not feeling real confident, guys. Oh. You're hearing the sound of defeat. So we ended up with a lot of runny ink, and we had a lot of color that was supposed to go through, but did not seem to go through. So, and that just looks like crap. It's not quite placed right, and I don't know that I can get it all the way off. Can. So in the moment when this is happening, my mind is already racing about what I could do. I am literally, as I'm putting this on, I'm meeting Kidder in a couple of hours to give him this gift, and it's not done, and the big centerpiece feature of it has just failed. So my mind is racing to solve, how am I going to fix this? What can I do? How do I make this work? See, that's just too low. Let's try maybe on the Texas side. Because it shouldn't be sitting quite that low. It needs to go up a bit. Okay, well, it's on as best as it's going to be. I'm not 100% thrilled with it, but it's what I got at this point. So let's try the microsol. Can't get any worse. Eesh. So the microsol is supposed to basically make the transfer look like it's part of the actual can and not a transfer. This is actually my first time using it. I'm using an older brush. I'm just brushing it on like it kind of says, and I'm hoping it's maybe going to help have the effect that I want it to have. We'll see. We'll see. And as you can kind of see it now, you can kind of see the colors on the can are faded. It's just not looking as bright and as sharp and as crisp as I wanted it to be. And I'm just not happy with it. But I don't have much time to solve it. With this. So the graphic kind of came out a bit disappointing because there are some of the colors and such that I would like to have seen come out more. So it ended up not as kind of crisp and sharp as I would like. It has honestly just kind of not come out quite the way that I would like it to, if I'm being honest, because I was thinking that the color of the graphic would have transferred, that all should be white and covered and we should be fine. But the problem is that the printer, when it printed that clear, so it now has things like this, which should have all been covered and it should have just been the state of Texas on there. Doesn't really quite work. So it looks okay. I'm not 100% happy with it. So what do we do in this situation? Well, we're going to try. This is maybe probably a terrible idea. But sometimes terrible ideas work. Since I have lost, it's not coming out the way I wanted. I've now taken two, just using some blue paint. I am going in and I am basically painting over the decal. Just to get, since I lost my color, it's no longer the kind of bright color I wanted. I'm just going to paint it on. And so I quickly race to paint on the blue and the white for the lettering and the skull, just to at least make that front graphic pop. As for kind of the outline, I actually went to a black permanent marker and did my best to trace it. And there we go. It's not as pretty as I had hoped, but you know what? It'll do. And there you have it. There's the process. You know, if you're looking at this and seeing now, you might notice different clothes than when I started this. Even my background has changed. This has taken me a year to kind of put this whole thing together, and you've gotten to see the ups and the downs of the process. And overall, it was pretty much a success. And if you don't believe me, remember, this is a gift. Here's what Kidder thought of it.
As long as you know.
I figured there'd be at least 30 strips on here, but just one. I understand.
Just one.
COVID, times are tough. I get it.
Got us have, you know, a stockpile of duct tape. Can't just waste it on you.
Right. We'll just... What do we got over here? Oh, look at this thing.
Oh, good.
Let's do one of these. Look at that.
Yeah. Won't focus.
Oh, it won't focus. Okay.
Yeah.
But Stone Cold said so. Broken Skull IPA. An IPA that I will try and I would guarantee that I will like. Nice. Thank you.
Pretty much made that from scratch.
Yep.
The finger coming out of it.
I think that's being done.
just you got to be the hand model for it.
Yeah, I needed to know like where like the veins would go and such. So Kate got to flip off a camera, and I.
You did that?
Yeah.
Holy wow.
You smell the paint.
I not only did that, I finished it. Literally put the sealing on it, put it in the box, taped it, and came here. Like I finished it like that.
It's great. Awesome.
And that's why I do these things, and why I've actually probably given away more miniatures than I've kept. You're getting to see some of the glamour shots of it. Overall, I'm very happy with this project and how it turned out. And I hope you've enjoyed coming along for the ride and seeing the success, the failure. There's parts of this model I love, like the hand, and there are parts like the label that just aren't there. But overall, the person it was intended for loves the model and is happy with it. And if you've been watching our main show for the past year, you've seen it on his set. It's always there. So here you go. A year in the making to finally put this video out, but you get to see all of the ups and downs and trials and tribulations. And I now have a great appreciation for everybody out there on YouTube who makes these tutorial videos. I learned a lot just doing this one, including I need to do a better script than my bullet notes that I did for this, because and some of the timing, I'll get there, but I don't know that I'll do this again for quite a while. There are other parts of my hobby that I want to enjoy and document. But enough rambling. If you've made it this far, you've sat through like an hour and some. I appreciate that. And I hope you will come back and check out more of the Cave of Wonder videos. I do enjoy this and do enjoy sharing the hobby journey with you. So hopefully you'll tune in for more. Hopefully we'll see you back in the cave. And hey, if you ever want some more content, please make sure to check out our main show, Beer, Blues, and BS. It's a great show where you can see the man who you just saw react, Kidder, and me sit down and talk about all the things that are interesting us. I talk about hobbies and controversies and things like that, and he talks wrestling and Star Trek, and it's a good time. Beers are drank, and it's just a good time with friends. So thank you once again for tuning in. I greatly appreciate it. And I'm Howard Blues, and we'll see you down here in the cave next time.